අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Saturday the 15th of April 2023. Debt rework. Sri Lanka's international private creditors reach out to authorities in Colombo with proposal to restructure over $12 billion in bonds. Progress. World Bank South Asia VP lauds progress made by Sri Lanka in fiscal and economic governance. Priorities. Public policy analyst points out that the government should prioritize SOE privatization, as the state doesn't have the manpower to privatize all 500 SOEs.
We have 500 state-owned enterprises. So what we need is to prioritize. There'll be some where I believe privatization is the solution. There'll be others where you could do some forms of partial privatization.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. From Studio 24 in Colombo.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In your top story for tonight, Sri Lankan bond holders reached out to Sri Lankan authorities today for the first time with their proposals on how the country's debt should be restructured. The bondholders, with about $12 billion in outstanding, include global investment companies Amundi Asset Management, BlackRock, HBK Capital Management, and T. Rowe Price Associates. Reuters reported that a committee of Sri Lanka's international private creditors sent its first debt rework proposal to the country's authorities regarding over $12 billion in outstanding bonds. It is the first bondholder proposal after the island nation of 22 million people defaulted on its debt a year ago. A source that wished to remain anonymous, speaking to Reuters, stated that it is the first formal step to engage with the country's authorities. The group of about 30 creditors includes global investment companies Amundi Asset Management, BlackRock, HBK Capital Management, and T. Rowe Price Associates. Two sources said that bondholders and government officials met in Washington this week with legal and financial advisors for both sides present. Separately, the Paris Club of Creditor Governments said yesterday that it aims to start negotiations to restructure Sri Lanka's bilateral debt after a committee was set up by French, Japanese, and Indian finance ministers and representatives of Sri Lanka. China, Sri Lanka's biggest bilateral creditor, did not join the announcement. In the meantime, Japan, India, and France launched a creditor platform yesterday in order to help Sri Lanka restructure its debt with its primary bilateral creditors, with an invitation extended to all other bilateral creditors to join the effort as well. Speaking during yesterday's joint media briefing to launch the platform, Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kenji Okamura, called on all bilateral creditors to work together and conclude negotiations before Sri Lanka faces the first review with the IMF. Now, World Bank Vice President for South Asia, Martin Reyes, stated that he is glad to see progress on fiscal, financial and economic governance reforms in Sri Lanka, and that the World Bank will support Sri Lanka's economic recovery with support by means of financing and ideas. Meanwhile, he added that transparency is key to all reforms, including reforms implemented with the aim of protecting vulnerable groups. A meeting between the State Minister of Finance Shehan Semsingh and the Vice President of the World Bank for South Asia, Martin Reyes, was held yesterday on the sidelines of the meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in Washington. Martin Reyes stated that in order to succeed in all matters, including the reforms implemented with the aim of protecting vulnerable groups, transparency must be maintained. The discussion were focused on cooperation on transforming to a digital economy as well as the progress of the targeted social safety net. Further, Reyes explained his satisfaction with the progress made in the implementation of reforms in Sri Lanka and added that the World Bank will provide financing and ideas in order to support Sri Lanka's recovery. The Sri Lankan delegation in Oman stated that Sri Lanka is currently looking at to enter into new agreements with Oman to consolidate bilateral collaboration after a recent round of political consultations with the Gulf state. Sri Lanka is looking to enter new agreements with Oman to consolidate bilateral collaboration after a recent round of political consultations with the Gulf state. The foreign ministers of Sri Lanka and Oman held earlier this week the third session of their bilateral political consultations, which were first established in 2014 to strengthen ties between the two countries. The virtual meeting took place between Sri Lanka's delegation, led by Additional Secretary for Consular, Middle East and Africa Affairs, ULM Jauhar, and Oman's delegation headed by the Department of International Cooperation, Chief Sheikh Ahmad bin Saif Al Rawahi. Colombo's ambassador to the Sultanate of Oman, Sawarullah Khan, and senior officials from both sides also participated in the discussions, which the Sri Lankan Foreign Ministry said were focused on broadening the existing areas of cooperation and entering into new bilateral agreements. Middle East and Africa Affairs ULM Jauhar, speaking to international news agencies, said that several new initiatives in the spheres of agriculture, tourism, education, fisheries, trade, investment, employment promotion, vocational training, skills development, and culture were discussed at the meeting. With about 30,000 Sri Lankans living and working in Oman, he said the two countries enjoyed long-standing bilateral relations and excellent people-to-people contacts, as Sri Lankan nationals have been contributing to the development of Oman in multiple sectors. Sri Lanka and Oman established their diplomatic relations in 1981, but contacts between their people have had a longer history. Colombo's former ambassador to Muscat told Sri Lanka that Oman-Sri Lanka relations go back in history, and the two nations are bound by a vibrant tradition of people-to-people contacts, and that as countries sharing the Indian Ocean, they are well poised for greater cooperation to encompass many areas of mutual interest. He said that Oman is an unexplored destination for Sri Lankans, and there is great potential for cooperation. He added that both countries have many potential commonalities that could be synergized for mutual benefits. Now, public policy analyst Professor Rohan Samarajiva believes that it would be more feasible for the government to look at privatizing only some state-owned enterprises, as the state lacks the manpower and resources to privatize the 500 or more SOEs. Speaking to Indivari Amuwatta at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, he emphasized on the need for government to prioritize on the SOEs that should be prioritized.
In your opinion, is privatization the only way out of this for these major
I have never said
SOEs?
it's the only way. I don't think we can handle 500 plus privatizations. I just don't think we have the capacity in the government to handle 500 plus privatizations. Because if you look back at the successful privatization that we did, that a lot of people talk about, Sri Lanka Telecom, that took about 2 years of work. Good consulting firms, local partners, local counterparts, doing good work. A lot of preparation went into that, right? So you need that kind of muscle to do that. Even the Sri Lankan privatization, the original one that happened in 1999, if I recall correctly, even that took a significant amount of resources to do it properly, to have an open competition, to have a proper marking scheme, to assess the competence of the bidders, their capabilities. It takes time. And you usually use foreign consultants to do these things because we don't have. Who has had experience in doing this kind of work? It's only a foreign consultant who will have the experience. We will have book knowledge, but you can't, having been in this economy, we have got, give or take, 100, whatever, 500 state-owned enterprises. So what we need is to prioritize. There'll be some where I believe privatization is the solution. There'll be others where you could do some forms of partial privatization so that in the end it ends up as a public-private partnership. SAGT is a public-private partnership. The Ports Authority owns 15% of the operation. Sri Lanka Telecom, more than 50% is owned by the government. The government is still capable of putting the chairman of the board and has a majority on the board, and so on. So there are things that you can do. You can structure them differently. You can make them more private sector, that is, reduce the percentage without taking it down to zero. Then you could have, the government recently reported that they're going to put something called statements of corporate intent, tripartite agreements that the chairman of the state-owned enterprise, the secretary of the responsible ministry, and the secretary of treasury will jointly sign. Now, again, has been done before. I've seen them and they were not implemented. Those entities continued to be loss-making, continued to be dysfunctional. So what I would say is, if you're doing statements of corporate interest, there's a government department called the Department of Public Enterprise. They should really get their act together, maybe get some external consultants, and get some nice, tight agreements done.
Why do you think ICT exports or foreign exchange, the envisaged amount of flows into the country, have not been achieved so far?
In the service exports, before the crisis hit, we were doing about 7 billion. Of that, about 4 billion would have come from tourism. Next identifiable segment is what we called IT-enabled services. Basically, you can think of it as two categories. One is software, and the other is this thing called business process outsourcing. There was a telecom monopoly. We removed that telecom monopoly, right? Only SLT could do international connectivity. They had a 5-year exclusivity. It was expiring and it was not renewed. It was opened up to other companies. And some investors in this area were telling me, we need redundancy of media and we need redundancy of suppliers. That is, what they meant is, we can't rely on one fiber optic cable going under the sea. We want more than one. Media. And we can't be relying on one company that is supplying services over all these media. We want multiple companies. So we gave them what they wanted. Now we have 6, 7, even more cables landing in this country. And we have multiple companies that you can buy services from. When I was chair of the ICT agency, they were telling me the earnings were about 1 billion. Recently, somebody told me that Export Development Board figure that it was 1.7 billion. 1.7 is pretty good in this day and age. But there are other things that we can do. Even for the remaining 5 or 10 years that this BPO business has, there are things that can be done for them.
Meaning there are things that can be done to
help them with the finances, all these withholding provisions, all these reporting requirements. They came to me and said, we had 0% and now we are 30%. I'm not saying it shouldn't be 30%. I'm saying 0 was wrong. I don't know who gave the government the idea of giving these people completely tax-free on their profits. Aren't they using resources here? Don't they have to pay for the roads that they drive on? So 0 was wrong. But going from 0 to 30 in one fell swoop, maybe that was a little too harsh. I would like the ministers to have an open door and have these conversations and be open to these people who are creating valuable jobs, who are bringing in dollars.
Now, the leaders of all political parties are scheduled to convene in Parliament at 10 a.m. on the 20th of April under the patronage of Speaker Mahinda Yapa. Accordingly, all party leaders have been reportedly informed to attend the meeting, as it will be the first meeting after the Sinhala Tamil New Year. Meanwhile, the first parliamentary session since the festive season is due to take place shortly after the party leader meeting on the 25th of April. Preparations have also been made for the proposed anti-terrorism bill to be taken up in Parliament on the 25th of April. However, a final decision pertaining to the matter will be made at the party leaders' meeting scheduled prior. Although the proposed bill was initially supposed to be tabled in Parliament on the 4th of April, several parties oppose the move. And we'll be back with more news right after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන් කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ටීමෝ වෙතින්. මේ අලුත් අවුරුද්දේ හිත පිරෙන ගනුදෙනුවකට හොඳම තැන හිත ගිය තැන බැංකුව HNB. පාරිභෝගිකයන් වෙත අසම සම ප්‍රතිලාභ හිමි කර දීම අපට අභිමානයක්. රුපියල් බිලියන 9.8ක බෝනස් නිකුතුවක්. මාසිකව වන්දි ගෙවීම රුපියල් බිලියන 1.8ක්. මානුෂීය හේතුන් සැලකිල්ලට ගනිමින් වන්දි ලබා දීම. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඉන්ෂුරන්ස්.
Welcome back. Now, Air Seychelles plans to launch flights from its largest island to Colombo with twice weekly flights commencing on the 20th of June 2023. Meanwhile, Air Seychelles Chief Commercial Officer Charles Johnson stated that the upcoming partnership with Sri Lankan Airlines will allow travellers to purchase a single ticket for travel beyond Colombo to other destinations in Asia, adding that this service will drastically reduce current travel times and at prices much lower than the currently seen in the market. Air Seychelles has announced that it has plans to launch flights from its largest island Mahi, Seychelles to Colombo with twice weekly flights as of June. The Indian Ocean region is expected to become more connected, reflecting this program's commencement with its first flight on June 2023. The flight is to arrive at Colombo at 10:05 p.m. after a 4 hours trip, while the route will be flown by the airline's latest and most efficient Airbus A320neo model, equipped with 12 business class and 156 economy class configurations. Air Seychelles Chief Commercial Official Charles Johnson commented on the route, stating that Air Seychelles is very excited about this opportunity to link Seychelles with Sri Lanka, a destination in its own right with excellent tourist, medical and trading opportunities which all people from Seychelles can benefit from. He also stated that the upcoming partnership with Sri Lankan Airlines will allow travellers to purchase a single ticket for travel to Colombo to other destinations in Asia, adding that this service will drastically reduce current travel issues and at prices much lower than the current prevailing market rates. And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Tune into our social media pages for the very latest news. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.